What does it mean to be pro-life? Is it all about opposing abortion and euthanasia, or does that include other topics like the death penalty or the treatment of immigrants? Well, a recent statement by Pope Leo XIV has stirred up this controversy, and so I would like to take this opportunity to unpack in this video what the Church actually teaches on this matter, and what many Catholic commentators are getting wrong. Hello everyone, and welcome back. Last week, Pope Leo seemed to have dropped a bombshell. During a press conference, he was asked about the case of an American cardinal who was going to honor with an award an American senator who had distinguished himself for his efforts for immigration reform, but who was also pro-choice. Naturally, this gave rise to quite a controversy, and this is how Pope Leo answered the journalist's question. It is important to look at many issues that are related to the teachings of the Church. Someone who says, I am against abortion, but says I am in favor of the death penalty, is not really pro-life. Someone who says that I am against abortion, but I am in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the United States, I don't know if that's pro-life. Church teaching on each one of these issues is very clear. These words shocked many people, but frankly, it was only a bombshell if you had not been paying attention. Why? Because Leo has been shown consistently to be teaching in continuity with Pope Francis, and his choice of papal name shows a particular interest in Catholic social teaching. Still, the question remains, is this really church teaching? The usual commentators immediately jumped on Leo's statement, saying that it actually contradicted Catholic doctrine. And when they did so, they, as usual, pulled out a quote from Joseph Ratzinger where he said, "Not all moral issues have the same moral weight as abortion and euthanasia. For example, if a Catholic were to be at odds with the Holy Father on the application of capital punishment or on the decision to wage war, he would not for that reason be considered unworthy to present himself to receive Holy Communion. There may be a legitimate diversity of opinions, even among Catholics, about waging war and applying the death penalty, but not, however, with regard to abortion and euthanasia." But here's the kicker. What if I told you that this quote is not official church teaching and therefore not binding on faithful Catholics? When Ratzinger wrote these words, he had still not been elected Pope Benedict XVI, so these words do not participate in his magisterium as a pope. At the time, he was the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, working under Pope St. John Paul II. Does this mean that Ratzinger's words do not bear any authority? Well, not necessarily, but according to a very important document on this matter, Donum Veritatis, paragraph 18, the documents from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith only participate on the Pope's teaching authority when they are explicitly approved by the Pope in forma specifica. And Ratzinger's letter containing the famous quote, it was not that at all. It was a memorandum sent privately to then Cardinal McCarrick and which was leaked in 2004. Fast forward to 2021. Cardinal Adaria, who was the prefect of the same office at the time, clarified that Ratzinger's letter was written in the form of a private letter to the bishops, and that these principles were never intended for publication. Ladaria went even further. He said that Ratzinger's personal communication should not take precedence over another officially papally approved document of the time. Finally, Cardinal Ladaria gave a strong warning to the American bishops. He told them that if they issued their own statement of who should or shouldn't receive communion, as they were planning to do at the time, it would be misleading if such a statement were to give the impression that abortion and euthanasia alone constitute the only grave matters of Catholic moral and social teaching that demand the fullest level of accountability on the part of Catholics. So let's summarize. Ratzinger's quote was in a letter that was not issued by him as a pope, but as prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. This letter was not approved in forma specifica by the Pope. It was a private letter, it was not meant for public consumption, and it should not take precedence over official, papally approved documents. In other words, it's not magisterial, and Catholics are not required to give their assent to it. Still, the question remains. What is the actual church teaching on this matter? Well, before we dive in, if you're liking this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to be notified whenever any new videos of mine are released. Also, please consider checking my personal website, pedrogabrielwriter.com, where you will know more about my other activities, namely my articles and books. In the context of this video, I would like to particularly highlight my other book, Heresy Disguised as Tradition, where I use historical precedent to debunk the widespread idea that Catholics can just dismiss official papal teaching if it goes against their personal interpretation of tradition. Now, back to the question. What is the actual church teaching on this matter? Well, as you all know, in 2018, Pope Francis revised the Catechism so that it would include a passage that says that the death penalty was to be deemed as inadmissible. That sounds clear enough, but I would like to point out that just because a teaching is in the Catechism, it does not become automatically magisterial. Teachings of faith and morals are not magisterial because they are in the Catechism. Rather, they are in the Catechism because they are magisterial. So we need to track down the actual magisterial source that is behind Francis's Catechism revision. And if we read that paragraph, we see that it cites one of Pope Francis's addresses back in October 11, 2017. A papal address, when it deals on teachings of faith and morals and is delivered by the Pope in his official capacity as the Pope, belongs to the Pope's ordinary magisterium. And in this case, this particular address was even used as the foundation for the Catechism revision. So we know that Pope Francis intended it to be magisterial. But the authority of this teaching does not stop here. When Francis issued his revision of the Catechism, he asked the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith to issue a letter alongside this revision. And in this letter, we can read, "The new revision of number 2267 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, approved by Pope Francis, affirms that ending the life of a criminal as punishment for a crime is inadmissible because it attacks the dignity of the person, a dignity that is not lost even after having committed the most serious crimes. Now, this letter, unlike Ratzinger's letter, is available on the Vatican website. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you will see that this letter was actually explicitly approved by Pope Francis, who ordered its publication. So, according to Donum Veritatis, this letter from the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith participates in Pope Francis's ordinary magisterium. But Francis went even further than that. In his later encyclical Fratelli Tutti, he wrote, "There can be no stepping back from this position. Today we state clearly that the death penalty is inadmissible, and the Church is firmly committed to calling for its abolition worldwide." Now, this is an official papal teaching on morals expressed in a papal encyclical. And as Venerable Pope Pius XII wrote in his own encyclical Humani Generis, nor must it be thought that what is expounded in encyclical letters does not of itself demand consent, since in writing such letters the popes do not exercise supreme power of their teaching authority, for these matters are taught with the ordinary teaching authority, of which it is true to say, "He who heareth you heareth me." And generally, what is expounded and inculcated in encyclical letters already for other reasons appertains to Catholic doctrine. But if the Supreme Pontiffs, in their official documents, purposefully pass judgment on a matter up to that time under dispute, it is obvious that that matter, according to the mind and will of the pontiffs, cannot be any longer considered a question open to discussion among theologians. In other words, the teaching that the death penalty is to be considered today as inadmissible is part of the ordinary magisterium of the popes, and for that reason demands religious submission of mind and will from the faithful. So this covers the death penalty. What about the treatment of immigrants? Well, also in 2018, Pope Francis published an apostolic exhortation called Gaudete et Exsultate. In paragraph 101, Pope Francis reaffirms the Church's staunch opposition to abortion. But then he immediately adds, "Equally sacred, however, are the lives of the poor, those already born, the destitute, the abandoned, and the underprivileged, the vulnerable, infirm, and elderly exposed to covert euthanasia, the victims of human trafficking, new forms of slavery, and every form of rejection." We often hear it said that with respect to relativism and the flaws of our present world, the situation of migrants, for example, is a lesser issue. Some Catholics consider it a secondary issue compared to the grave bioethical questions. That a politician looking for votes might say such a thing is understandable, but not a Christian, for whom the only proper attitude is to stand in the shoes of those brothers and sisters of ours who risk their lives to offer a future to their children. Again, this was an apostolic exhortation. It was an official papal document approved by the Pope as such, and for that reason participates in Pope Francis's ordinary magisterium. So here's the bottom line. Critics have been accusing Pope Leo of contradicting church teaching, but not only was Leo not contradicting church teaching, he was actually faithfully passing what the church actually teaches. And here's the irony. These critics are relying instead on a single quote from Joseph Ratzinger that was never magisterial and never intended to be magisterial. And they give it a weightier authority than the Pope's actual magisterial teachings in order to oppose it. This alone should serve as a cautionary tale that these critics are unreliable in identifying and explaining what church teaching actually is. What is even more concerning is how these commentators were able to so successfully disseminate this politically skewered and distorted version of Catholic social teaching so that their followers are completely unaware of what the church actually teaches. So when the Pope comes along and faithfully expounds on the church teaching, these followers are unable to recognize it. Thankfully, Pope Leo's focus on church social teaching promises to bring clarity to these topics and many more where confusion reigns. But now the question is, will Catholics listen to the Pope, or will they continue to listen to political agents and unreliable and non-authoritative lay voices instead of the Church herself? Let us pray that they choose the first path. Now, some people might push back and say, well, abortion is intrinsically evil, whereas the death penalty and the treatment of immigrants is not. Or they might even say that the church allowed the death penalty in the past, in principle, so it cannot now deem it inadmissible. I'm going to address both of these objections in a future video, so please feel free to stick around. If you enjoyed this video, please consider again to like and subscribe. And also consider visiting my personal website, pedrogabrielwriter.com. Because if you enjoy this video, you'll probably also enjoy my books. That's all for today. God bless. Let us oppose the death penalty and the inhumane treatment of immigrants as much as we do abortion, and see you soon.